What is up, fellas? The Goob here, coming at you with another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. Got some really great content this week. I had been trying to get an archaeologist on the show, a specific archaeologist on the show, to discuss some things. Unsurprisingly, that's not going to happen. But the conversation I had with the archaeology department was extremely enlightening. So I'll be sharing that. I'll be covering that. And then I've got some calls from Mr. G and his friend. I apologize, I don't remember his name. But he is a glassblower. He's going to be commenting on the Lycurgus Cup, which I'm very interested to hear his opinions on. And I think Mr. G might want to share a little bit about mounds. We'll see. Before I get into that, Spicy Sun, fellas. So I took down the episode from last week. If you missed it, you didn't actually miss anything. But I was talking about the Northern Lights that we had seen and, saying, hey, we're going to be seeing this more frequently in the future. And immediately after that solar storm, which blasted us for 4 days straight with the most spectacular light show we've seen in well over 100 years, even with all of our increased light pollution, it was still more visible to more people than anything in well over 100 years. So right after that, the sun let out a much bigger burst. Thankfully, the sunspot had turned away from the Earth at that point, because that absolutely would have maybe not knocked us entirely back into the Stone Age, but it would have definitely done some very serious damage to us and our infrastructure. And the sun shows no signs of slowing down. The coming years are going to be more and more eventful. Our magnetic field is weakening more and more, and every time the sun blasts us, so even without the sun blasting us, the acceleration of our magnetic field deteriorating is accelerating. And then every time the sun blasts us, it knocks off a whole chunk of that magnetic field. Like it brings it down, instantly. So sun's getting more active, field's getting weaker, and these two things are just going to continue compounding until, our magnetic field rebounds. But things are quite likely to get very interesting until that happens. So, Spicy Sun. I'm still struggling with the blessing and the curse of having too much content. So it gets difficult to present it all when you have too much. You have so many choices. It's like, what do you focus on first? But I'll do my best. So I'm gonna, I think, try and do a full play-by-play of the conversation I had with the archaeology department. I called, left a message for the archaeologist asking if he'd be willing to be on a show, get a call back, not from the archaeologist, but from the archaeology department's media relations. Okay, so the head of media relations is returning my call. He was very polite. I very much appreciated that he returned my call. And despite him being very careful with his language, I learned some very interesting things. So, I was totally upfront with him. I go, hey, you would probably consider me an alternate historian. I'm largely in line with the mainstream, but I do see some things that don't seem to add up, and I just try and make sense of those on my show. And I would love to have him on the show to help me make sense of these things. I recognize that I've not spent my entire life studying this specific topic like he has. He has a unique access to this information that I just don't have. And so, I'd like him to have an opportunity to try and, with his knowledge, fill in the blanks that I'm seeing, right? Unsurprisingly, he goes, yeah, that's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. Very politely, again, and he's like, yeah, it's just there is really no potential upside, and who knows what the potential downside is. It's just not going to happen. Even if you weren't a pseudo-archaeologist or whatever, probably not going to have anyone on your show. Wasn't surprised by that. What I was surprised by was that it was not up to the archaeologist to make that decision. He did not get to choose whether or not he goes on my show. It was the media relations department that makes that decision. They choose who speaks to who and when and about what. So that was rather interesting to me. We then go on and, I tell him that, okay, so is there any way I can ask these questions? Is there any way I could have a one-on-one conversation with him? And he tells me, well, you can send us an email and put your questions in there, and then we'll answer them. I'm like, okay. And then he actually ended up bringing up the serpent mound. And so I go, that's interesting. And he mentions that it's far later than the Hopewell culture. And so I go, that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask him about. I believe there's some debate on the age of the Hopewell mound that you just mentioned. You just mentioned the mound in the date, and I believe there's some debate on that. And he goes, yeah, immediately. He goes, yeah, we're not going to be able to provide any comment on that. And I go, I actually wasn't trying to get you to provide a firm date or anything like that. I'm more interested in the debate itself. Are there similar debates happening with other mounds? And he goes, yeah, we're not going to be able to provide any comment on anything like that. So I've talked about this before, how the outward-facing archaeology, it presents a very firm grasp of history. It presents itself as knowing, as if there is no debate internally, as if here's the facts, exactly what the facts are. These are the only facts. There's nothing else to look into. This is the exact answer. And then when I read research papers, when I actually get my hands on the raw research papers, which is very difficult to do, I see that, everything they're presenting to the public is totally bogus. There are questions about this within archaeology. There are other ideas proposed. There's a lot there. I'm going to be covering just how corrupt American archaeology has gotten, and it's far worse than I imagined, and I was imagining it really, really bad. Having said that, there's plenty of good archaeologists in the field. There's plenty of people who are just trying to genuinely do their work, but none of that is allowed to be presented to the public, right? Any type of debate or controversy or anything like that is absolutely off limits to the public. Now, this was just a single department. It was a very large department, okay, but it was just a single department. So could this be different in other departments? Quite possibly, but I have a very strong suspicion that this is pretty ubiquitous. This is pretty universal. You're going to find the same exact attitude throughout archaeology. And even if you wouldn't have, I'll be getting to some federal laws which guarantee that you do now, very recent federal laws. So, says he can't comment on anything along those lines. I also brought up Hanukkah Mound. I mentioned that the Hanukkah Mound was my biggest piece of interest, because it seems like very on its face evidence of other cultures interacting with the Americans. And so is there any comment on that? Is there an alternate explanation? Is it simply didn't exist? Is there anything that could be said about that? And the way the conversation was flowing, he managed to avoid ever addressing that question at all. And it really was, it wasn't in a situation where it's like, okay, he's very deliberately avoiding this. It's just kind of how the conversation flowed. He has media relations. I assume it's something he probably didn't want to comment on. I wouldn't be surprised if I did try to push that question further if I wouldn't have gotten a response. But none was given. It didn't seem out of place to not give one. I'm just trying to make that clear. It flowed naturally in the conversation, but zero acknowledgement of Hanukkah Mound was given. And then there were a couple little things that I was picking up on, but I didn't really understand until I did more research after the phone call. One was that I was asking for access to images of artifacts. I'm struggling to find this stuff online. are there any good repositories of images, libraries of images, just cataloging, artifacts from the Hopewell or even other cultures of the Native Americans? And he starts telling me about federal laws that prohibit the display of these things. And he explains that first of all, before I even get into that, first of all, he had an issue with the word artifact. Again, very politely, choosing his words carefully, but he was questioning my usage of the word artifact. And I could tell it was sort of an uncomfortable thing, right? And I explained to him, by artifact, I mean anything worked by man, any type of object that had been worked by man, the literal definition of artifact. And he accepted that and moved on from the artifact thing. I later found out that the PC woke bullshit is getting so extreme that artifact is now an offensive term, at least in regards to Native American cultures. You are not allowed to use artifact. They are removing it deliberately from all of their research and all of their references. Archaeologists across America are getting rid of the word artifact. There were several other words also that were offensive. I don't even remember what they were. But you're not allowed to say artifact anymore. That's a racism towards those Redskins, all right? So don't say artifact, or else you're basically calling them the N-word, apparently. But he goes on to talk about the federal laws and regulations that prohibit the display of any type of anything to do with burials, ceremonial artifacts, or any significant artifact whatsoever that might have been passed down through generations, right? So pretty much you're not allowed to see anything. It is federally illegal. And I learned this after the phone call because I was a little confused by what he was saying at the time. But he was telling me anything to do with funerary objects or any potential link to any burial of any type, anything that is ceremonial, anything that would have been, an heirloom potentially, and anything that's even potentially any of those things or linked to any of those things is strictly off limits from the public. You are not allowed to display it in museums. You can look up, there's many news articles about, I guess I should talk a little bit about the law. This law was enacted in January of this year. So January of this year, this new law was enacted so that and immediately displays in museums had to be taken down, covered up. There were a bunch of museums that just threw tarps over their displays because all of a sudden overnight they became illegal. They became federally illegal for anyone in the public to view any of this. Yeah, they were off limits for sure. Man, my brain just went blank. But yeah, I knew that, and I've talked about it before, about the pretty extreme reach that Native Americans have when it comes to any archaeology within the continent, or at least within the United States. They have the ultimate say-so on whether or not a dig happens, what goes on at that dig, what tests are done, when it stops. They can revoke whatever they say at any point in time. They can retroactively be like, nope, that's ours, cover that up. They do whatever the hell they want. But now you're not even allowed to legally display these things. So not only were the museums covered up and taken down, the displays, anything online, images were scrubbed from the internet. It is federally illegal to display this stuff. Now, I don't know if this applies to private collections. I need to reread the law again. I read it once, but it's, in legalese and everything, so it's a bit dense. I don't know if it applies to private collections, but it certainly applies to museums and universities and things like that. So the reason I'm having such trouble finding information online is because it no longer exists. It's illegal to be online now. It's illegal to be in person. This also is in direct contradiction to the 1990s, I think it's AGPRA or whatever it is, which states that anything found on the continent of the United States in an archaeological setting has to be displayed to the public. Anything that is found after 1990 in an archaeological dig must be available to the public for viewing. And now this new law has explicitly made it so that the public cannot view any of it. So a little bit more about this law, right? So previously, it was up to the museums and the archaeology departments and the universities to decide which native cultures these artifacts belong to. And if there was any repatriation, it was the museums and the universities which made these decisions. They did so through the location that these artifacts were found and these remains were found, and they did so through DNA testing. Now with this new law, every artifact has to be pulled from display. It has to be pulled from the record. None of this is allowed to be known about to the public in any sense whatsoever anymore. Okay? And then it is up to the tribes themselves to claim the artifacts. If just one tribe claims it, that's all that has to happen. That artifact's now theirs. They physically take possession of it, and anything that's done with it is fully up to them. If multiple tribes claim it, then it goes into mediation, and it was not really clear on exactly how that would be settled. But regardless, all of this needs to be pulled from the public and withheld from the public, returned to these tribes. Until they are returned to these tribes, they're just held in this limbo of not allowed to being shown to the public, and they're not claimed by anyone yet, so they're just put on a shelf and hidden away. No reference online, no reference anywhere. You're not allowed to know about it whatsoever. If they are claimed by the tribes, now the only way to get access to it is if the tribe allows access to it. The tribes generally are not putting these things on display. So the only way to actually view any American archaeology that is potentially related to the Native Americans is to either be working within archaeology and have access through your credentials through those avenues, and you won't even have direct access to these things. They'll be with the tribes now, but access at least to the records that we had created previously, which are not accessible to the public. Or you befriend the tribes. You actually have to befriend the tribes and gain access through them to view all of this stuff. So American archaeology as absolutely being hit. It is literally illegal to know about American archaeology now as the public. You're just not allowed. I think I may have skipped an aspect or two of the conversation. If it occurs to me, I'll bring it up later. So, you know, you see these bad actors like Flint Dibble, who obviously are very actively trying to condemn anyone and attack anyone who goes against the mainstream. And they're doing it because they're going against the mainstream, because they're going against the consensus in the narrative. Their attacks, you know, like Graham was called anti-Semitic for suggesting that the Olmec heads looked African. Not even that they were African, just that they looked it. This was misogynistic and anti-Semitic and a bunch of other words, but those two were the funniest to me, that claiming they look African was misogynistic and anti-Semitic. You know, so these attacks are utterly ridiculous, and they're coming purely because how dare you question us? You know, I've been looking for archaeologists to get on the show. I'm looking through various departments, but it wasn't my first thought or choice, but I've turned to YouTube. Hey, maybe I can find someone who's already on YouTube. Maybe they'll be more willing to come on the show. Pretty much all of the archaeologists on YouTube are massive, massive assholes. I did manage to find a girl who seemed pretty nice. She debunked Ancient Aliens, which is a ridiculous show, and she wasn't horribly rude about it. She wasn't horribly unpleasant about it. But at the very end of the episode, she said something which was rather interesting, which is that it's personally insulting and offensive to her to hear people saying ideas like this, because she has dedicated her life and her career to working on this stuff. And how dare you question and contradict what I've dedicated my life to? It's an insult to her. It's an insult to all of archaeology, to all of the people that came before her and have put all of this work into building this narrative. How dare you go against it? That's offensive and insulting. And so this is something that is very natural, human, emotion, but it's also something that you very clearly see going on in this, debate, in this diatribe that's going on back and forth between the alternate historians and the mainstream ones. But like I said earlier, when you actually get into the research, when you actually get your hands on the data collected by the people on the ground doing it, you often see that these same questions that are being raised by the alternate historians are being raised by the archaeologists themselves. But how dare you say it publicly? Now you've insulted all of archaeology. And so there is this very strong, there's literally laws now. It's federally illegal. You can get in legal trouble at this point in the Americas if you disclose this stuff. They have media relation departments where they very clearly go, no, we cannot possibly touch on any controversy. We're not willing to speak on that. We control who's allowed to speak and who isn't. I just realized I don't think I ever posted the link in chat. They have media relation departments where they very clearly... My mouse isn't working. Here we go. Do I have the link copied? I do not. That's my YouTube. So let me copy the link. I don't think I ever posted it. Excuse me while I interrupt myself. Give me a moment here, fellas. Copy invite link. Okie dokie. Just stare at my chin for a minute. Let me pin this. Okay. There we go. Should be good. So yeah, it's insulting to them. You see, like I was saying, it's now illegal, so you can actually get into legal trouble for potentially talking about this stuff, displaying this stuff. A mini. That's what's going on. There we go. But there, you also see, and you see this in all kinds of industries, this unspoken conspiracy, if you will. So, you listen to newscasters who have retired, and they'll openly tell you, it's like, no one ever sat me down and told me. There was no memo that went around the company saying, don't talk about this, but it was very well understood. There were just certain things you wouldn't talk about. You don't cover these things on the news, and if you do, here's the door, right? You lose your job real quick. This is this unspoken understanding. It exists in all kinds of industries. It is not just archaeology. It's not just news. You see this pretty ubiquitously. I had a bunch of other examples to share, but I'm kind of blanking on them right now. Hopefully you get the point. And so, is this a grand conspiracy? It's getting harder to say it's not, with, federal laws being enacted, people like Dibble, who it's okay. Here was my other example, so COVID, right? The entire medical institution was forced to adopt a single narrative. Of course, there's good doctors out there. Of course, there's people who tried to go against it and they lost their jobs and they were censored and they were called horrible things. And so it's, and then you see also competition is a very natural thing for people. But our modern world has largely eliminated the methods of competition that have existed throughout humanity. No one's participating in sports and these physical conquests anymore. And it's now become this competition of tearing other people down, right? A lot of this competitive energy it's been redirected towards who can destroy someone else's life. And again, you see this across the board. There's the doctors who probably did have genuine malicious intent. They knew what they were doing was wrong and they pushed it anyways for financial or whatever other reasons, right? Then you have the doctors who are truly looking for the truth and they are willing to put their careers on the line and their reputations on the line to pursue that truth. And we saw what happened to them. And then you see all of the people in the middle who, probably fall along a spectrum, but like so many of them were so eager to tear down their fellow doctors, the ones that were in pursuit of truth. Did they have any real motivation or reason to do any of this, other than, again, this unspoken agreement? This is the narrative. This is what we're all going along with, as well as, as a form of competition and as a form of elevating yourself. Look, I just took down this guy. That puts me above him. It's this sick, twisted version of competition that has been bred through our modern lifestyle, which is very unfortunate. And you absolutely see it in archaeology, like I was talking about Dibble and these other goons that go around calling anyone racist. And this is particularly evident in American archaeology, where we had this entire idea of manifest destiny. This country only exists because we had the blessing of God. Us, civilized folk were coming over here and not stealing land. We were acquiring land that was rightfully ours as the civilized folk and taking it from these brutal savages. Okay, so this entire idea of manifest destiny, the entire creation of the country, is founded on that idea. And so there was a lot of motivation to insist that natives were the only people here initially. And now this is twisted to racism and wokeism, right? So anyone, it doesn't matter what culture you're claiming was over here. It doesn't matter in what context. You could be claiming that they never even set foot on the shore, that they just sailed up and crashed, invisible, and you could claim that Asians crash landed on the coast and didn't survive, never even set foot in America. You would be labeled a white supremacist for doing so. Anything that goes against the narrative, you are immediately and viciously labeled a white supremacist. And I don't know, fellas, I'm probably repeating a lot of stuff you guys already know and believe. It's just, I don't know how coincidental, this law is. You see an obvious increase in interest in this type of stuff. And this year, while these things are gaining in interest, now it is literally illegal to know anything about America pre-Columbus. As the public, it's illegal. One other thing from the phone call, I skipped a little thing. I asked if I could access the raw research papers. Is there any, since I can't access images anymore, can I at least get access to some text? And I was told I could if I scheduled an appointment and viewed them in person. You can get all the access you want to the research papers if you schedule an appointment and show up in person. So, all of this is ridiculous. I knew it was restricted. I knew the public was being restricted. I had no idea it was to this extent, and it's very recently to this extent. It's harder and harder to not look at this and say something nefarious is going on. And in the same way with the examples of the news and the media, where 99% of these people are just going along with it, whether they're going along with it so they can boost their own clout, their own social standing by taking other people down, or they're going along with it just because they know if they don't, they'll get taken down, or, if they're going along with it for malicious reasons or whatever, there is likely still someone at some point in this chain who is quite literally conspiring. Like, you look at COVID, you look at someone is setting this narrative. So much of it is unspoken, but there probably is very literal conspiracy going on as well. And the same is true for archaeology. And I've tried really hard not to credit these things to conspiracy, but with all of this new information, it's getting harder and harder for me to do that. And obviously at some point, these dibbles, right, Are they never, ever, ever meeting with each other over dinner and going, yeah, we need to take this asshole down. We need to, right? It obviously is. And it obviously is malicious. Is the maliciousness coming from a point of let's cover up history? Or is it just coming from a point of, like I said, this twisted competition? It's hard to say. I think there's a mix of all of it. But it's really, really sad to see the state of American archaeology. So, yeah, and again, just want to stress the avoidance was very natural in the conversation. He did not in any way have to go out of his way to avoid it. It's just the way the conversation flowed that it almost was more natural to avoid it. But it's I don't think it's a coincidence either. I think he would have avoided it if I continued to push it. Yeah, that's something. I was talking to a coworker who went to school for anthropology, and a couple interesting things. One, the dude's a very interesting person. In a world where you can learn one fact about someone and deduce 99% of their beliefs off of that, this dude did not fit into any box. He is very anomalous. So that was fun. But I was telling him about the things I've learned in America, and the dude was finishing my sentence. He's like, I was talking about trepanning, and he's like, oh yeah, you mean the skulls that are found in South America with over 90% survival rates? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But he was also just confirming that even before this law was enacted, to get access to a lot of this information, you pretty much had to befriend these tribes. These tribes have, even before this law, they have their own galleries, they have their own collections, right? And this stuff isn't available to the public. You have to befriend these tribes to get access to it. And he had done this. And it's just, now with the law, it's been taken to a whole nother extreme. I remember you mentioning the Borage order. Struggling to remember what exactly it was, though. Who are you referring to there, Mr. Watson? Did they not worship the cross pre-Christendom and become refuge for Christian discrimination? What you mean there, fella? Oh man, now I've switched up the chat. Let's see. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Mr. Gelunas. Yeah, there's the whole Saturn cross cube hexagram thing, Okay, so or Mr. Gelunas, you're welcome to call in at any point. I've mentioned that I have a preponderance of evidence of different cultures in America, and I'm struggling on how to present it. So I figured I'd give just 2 examples today, and I'll cover those after my call with Mr. Gelunas. So we're probably going to have Mr. Gelunas call back because I've only got 5 minutes left on the meeting. And Mr. Gelunas, if you would like, we'll do a quick test, see if you can get yourself working here.
Click if you want to switch to a different speaker or microphone.
We can hear you. We see, please start Irium Heboam. Don't know what that is. You should be able to hear me. I am unmuted.
Yo, can you hear me, dog?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Is it feeding back?
Not on my end.
All right. You have that? Does that say that for me? I can't see anything.
We don't see you, but we do hear you.
I'm unmuted too. Check. I thought I should have a camera going video. Let's see here. Hold on a second.
I'll give you a minute to finish.
Oh wow, I'm wicked late though. Is there a hell of a delay? Yeah, is there a mad delay for you, Goob?
I mean, I don't think so. All right. I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, go, and you let me know when you hear it. So like 1, 2, 3,
okay,
go.
I have to use my phone. All right, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
It does seem like there's some kind of wicked delay going on. Are you listening to me on YouTube instead of through Zoom? Because I have unmuted myself on Zoom. You should be able to hear me through Zoom. Make sure you're listening through there and not through YouTube. There shouldn't be a delay on Zoom.
Oh my god, it's so late. All right, dude. It's like a minute. It's like so late, it's not even funny.
The YouTube has that delay. Zoom shouldn't. Make sure you're listening on Zoom.
Just do your phone. I'm gonna just do the phone work. Word. I could try that again.
All right. I'm going to have to relaunch the meeting here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You choose whether you want to use your phone or whatever you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and relaunch, and hopefully we get it on try number 2. Just waiting for my slow computer to open up Zoom. There we go. So after this phone call, I've got 2 examples of anomalous objects that were found in archaeological digs that are dismissed by archaeology. So, you know, when everything is claimed to be fake, they even go as far as to claim that the things they themselves find are fake. And I'll cover a couple examples of that after this phone call. Oh, I gotta re-invite myself, I forgot. All right, Michael, the link is in YouTube chat. Looks like you've already called in. Excellent. So I see on video.
Oh, wait a minute.
You should be able to hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
You know what? I must have double clicked. I think I had myself on mute, so you were forced to listen to YouTube. That was partially my bad, but now we have your camera and your audio, so this is working.
Cool. I got to be the cameraman too. So this is my buddy Dan. Hold on a second. So I'm having a little hard time. There we go. And Dan is the one who knows all about the cup, and so I'm gonna turn it over to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Okay, wait a minute. Turn that down right there one more time. Sorry, yeah. So go ahead and it's on you now.
Yeah, basically that, people are saying it's nanotechnology and all this like crazy, stuff that makes that thing. And it's actually not really a big deal. Right now they're, in the glass world, that's like the hot thing. It's called CFL glass. And depending on the spectrum of light that hits it, it can be sometimes 3 different colors. And in silver and gold, the effect that thing has, just layering silver and gold with fume will allow you to get those kind of colors. And like a lot of the color that's in that is heavy silver work, like the outside that makes it look kind of like butterscotch, which is actually a color in the Boro world. it's very similar to that. And like the way how they, when they say on Google how it has different colors depending on if the light's coming from the back or the front, that would basically, to me, indicated that that's pretty much what they're doing is the silver and fume. And that's a very common thing that's used today. And the way they got the probably molds or something called a growl technique, a form of sandblasting that they used to cut the images away to make them look like that. But the Romans were really into glass. They used a lot of glassware. Like it was kind of like the elite of the elite would use glass instead of like pewter or lead or whatever else they use. You know what I mean? But yeah, there's been a lot of that stuff found. But that cup in itself, like that technique, you see a lot of that stuff today. And there's the glass is called CFL or shifty glass. If you look it up on Google.
Yeah, it's popular in bongs.
Yeah, it is. Like that's where, like that's what, and in the glass world in general, like, there's a lot of, the boro world is more than that now, much more. There's a whole movement of people making sick art underground, and it's starting to come out, like the stuff like that. Yeah, that's an old technique of silver and gold. It's and the thing called a grail technique that's painted on there and cut off. You basically use soft glass and have some kind of an abrasive, and it like just basically sands it away. You get layers to layer fume. You take gold and spray it on the glass, roll that in frit and cover that up, spray gold on or silver on that to cover that up. Depending on what light it hits, it will definitely mask. It looks just like that.
Okay, so that's the I don't know the word you used, a grail or something like that.
Yeah, growl technique.
Growl. Okay, so that's what I'm really interested in learning about, because I sort of understand the fumed, gold and silver aspect of it somewhat. But what you're saying is very interesting to me and something that I wouldn't have even considered. So I've got some images of the grail pulled up, of the cup pulled up. So you're saying that this was formed, they would take soft glass, kind of roughly shape the soft glass, and then they would add the details by actually sanding it down after.
Yeah.
And this could also be used with the color changing aspect. So if part of the glass didn't have enough or had too much, they could potentially sand it down to remove some or blow some back into it and adjust it as they're making it.
Yeah, it's layered. Basically, what you do is you make like a slug.
Very interesting.
You would start with clear, and then however you want your colors to come out. Like with the gold and silver, you can get multiple layers. If you do silver first, then gold, it comes out like emerald. If you do the reverse, it comes out green, yellow, and orange. So it's like how it's layered, and they'll just pour more clear over it. So then they work back to that layer till they get the desired effect. And then it leaves the rest. It can be multiple colors. I do it myself, so like you take like a really dark color and then take silver and fume over that dark color of black. And then I just print stickers off the internet that I use stuff called photoreductive paper. So I make a black and white image of any image I want, like Marilyn Monroe's face, and take that sticker and put it around my slug that I have like black glass in the middle, and then the silver fume around it. And then you just take a sandblaster and it will take where the black ink on that paper is and sand it away and leave all the white ink. So you can have all these ornate pictures. And if you they make rubber stickers that are thick, so you can do the same effect and cut through multiple layers of glass with them. They make special they kind of look like weird neoprene stickers. They're like foamy. So they bounce the sand off much longer, and it allows them to cut deeper into the glass. There's a guy called Mickelson. You look up Mickelson glass art. He's famous for his growl technique. You get to search that, Mickelson growl technique. And he's got some really next level glass that will kind of look like this, and some of it's like next level. The Romans had a rudimentary grasp on it. They were doing all kinds of stuff for the technology that they had at the time, but where it's come since this is
So that was
crazy.
another question I had is I'm ignorant of the world of glass blowing, right? I mean, I've seen some really impressive marbles and all kinds of things, but I know very little about it. And so when I was looking at this, you know, I'm like, man, this seems really very impressive. It's extremely detailed. It's very consistent. And then like with glass welding, you know, which you see in a lot of bongs, they'll make them piecemeal and then weld them together, and you can see the seam on the glass weld. And that was one thing I noticed here is that I see no seams going on here.
Well, because they're using big plugs. There's no seam if you start with a giant piece. You know what I mean? Your seam will be just on your mouthpiece and the top rim and the bottom, which they covered with something, and you know they use as a technique to cover your access points as well.
Right.
And when you pop the lip of it, that will be all clean with no seam. It just all starts. It depends on the size of the slug you use. I mean, I've seen soft glass shops. They're making vases as big as me. You know, they got 3 people rolling these heavy duty things on a bench, and they're flopping around, 3 foot off the mandrel. And these guys are blowing these mega things. Like I live right next to Corning, so I've spent, thousands of hours right at Corning watching these guys do this stuff. And, cool. That's how you don't see any seams. And it's also an indicator of the skill.
Right.
Because if you really have skill, like when you look at my glass, you won't see very many seams. I personally pride myself on it, because like it takes a lot more to do that. You have to start with much tinier access points. That's how you get the seams to disappear. Instead of taking like 2 large cups and circles and sticking them together, you make the tiniest little, like the size of a straw, and line that up and then work that out, and there's less surface area to actually make a seam, and the glass will just dissipate that, and you won't be able to see that.
Okay.
It's basically, and like a lot of commercial glass and things, if they're mass producing it, you won't see that. You will see the seams because it's, it doesn't matter to certain things, but in the high-end art world, that does matter. If you look up certain glass blowers, you see some of the, that's what the elites are. When you look at something, you can't see a single flaw. All your angles are rounded, but there's no acute angles because glass doesn't like that. It's just it's just basically the crafter's skill, that allows for that stuff to disappear. And for the Romans to do that does take skill.
Yeah.
How many thousands of years old, and these guys have been doing this stuff like that. I mean, it's a beautiful thing no matter when it was made, and the techniques implied are, to me, it's just proof that they were doing next level stuff long ago. And I wonder why there isn't more of this, because it takes, you're not going to come out of the gates making stuff like that. You're going to have a lot of stuff along the way that's going to be not so good until you arrive at that, and it's just always curious why, how they find these random artifacts in random places. And like, to do that, you have to be throwing it down, you know what I mean? And have an extreme grasp on what you're doing. The thing is actually flawless. It's beautiful. It's layered with silver and 24 karat gold. You can't get that color without 24 karat gold being caught in a flame and sprayed onto the glass, and then it's encapsulated. So you keep that pink hue. And then they do the same thing with the silver, encapsulate it, and then they have to work that glass back. Some of that might have been drawn on, some of it could have been grail. Until I hold it, it's hard to tell. But judging from what I see, either way, they're master glass blowers. You know what I mean?
Right.
The thing is thousands of years old. I just want to know, where's the rest of them? Somebody had to make more than one of those. You didn't just fall out of bed and be like, oh, I'm going to whip this out in a cave. You know what I mean?
That was the one-off. I've never done this before since.
Right.
So,
you know what I mean? Because it's next level. Even for today's standards, that thing, that's what makes it so unique. It's even people that are throwing it down in the glass industry look at something like that and you're like, yeah, that's sick.
Yeah.
That
was actually, and you've somewhat answered it. You've covered one comment I wanted to make and one question I wanted to make, which is, how many people today would be able to create this? very roughly speaking, is
probably a few thousand.
Okay. All right. So,
because there's been, there's a show on Netflix called Blown Away, where it takes, up and coming glass blowers in a soft glass, and they're all in a shop. It's a great show. I love watching it because it's, a half-hour episode I can watch here and there, and they have some of these great people doing these huge installations to try and get funding as a prize. You win. Whoever makes it to the end is like an elimination kind of glass blowing game, and it gives you get to see these up and coming artists, all the colors in the industry, like what people are doing with the medium. And there's some crazy stuff. Like, if you want to see some beautiful stuff and what's going on in the glass world, that show is like just a perfect little slice. So you don't have to have any grasp of what's going on because they show you.
Just
know
see
what I mean?
Cool stuff.
It's really good show to watch. There's a couple seasons, but yeah, they let you see what the medium has evolved to. But there's definitely only a few thousand, and there's a handful, and I'm talking, less than 100 that I would consider master glass blowers, like Cesare Toffolo and Emilio Santini, and like there's these Italian lamp workers that are making things that are almost machine perfect by hand. Off complete blow tubes, taking a 4-foot piece of Pyrex, putting it in front of a flame, cutting a piece off, pulling out their own blow tube out of glass, and then manipulating the glass with color, blowing that all down and blowing that into beautiful things. And like Cesare, he does pieces. I saw a piece of his that was 25 different discs that were all put together in a concentric line, and every single one of them was 1 millimeter different from the previous one. Exactly 1 millimeter, and that's all done off hand.
And that's done while stretching the glass. Yeah, that's crazy. Even with my limited understanding, I understand that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So the skill, that there's not a lot of people that can do it. That's what I mean with that cup. Like somebody had to teach that. That just doesn't happen.
Right.
That it's master's quality.
And that's that was the comment that I was gonna make, was that you see this all the time, but like you have archaeologists building their narrative around this glass with their expertise, which is not in glass blowing. And from what you just shared, it's very obvious they have no idea what they're talking about, because the story that they put forward is essentially that this piece was accidental. They didn't understand the micronization of gold and silver. They didn't understand the ratios. They didn't understand any of that. And part of the reason why is also something you touched on, which is that we don't see this progression of glass working up to this, right? You just kind of find this piece in isolation, which to me isn't too surprising because it's 2,500-year-old glass. Glass breaks, Yeah. But yeah, their claim is, this person who's obviously a master craftsman, like regardless of the color changing aspects, you look at the workmanship that goes into the details of this, and it's, like you said, it's flawless, and so to disrespect that and go, they didn't know what they were doing, this was an accident, this idiot just accidentally mixed in gold and silver at the exact right ratios. It's crazy.
Well, because that's another thing he was telling me earlier, right, dude? Like with the amount of nickel in the silver, it changes the color.
Yeah, the amount of nickel and impurities in the metal itself, like the colors we have in the glass world now, like I buy 24 karat gold wire in like 6-inch pieces and take little pieces off and spray. I do this technique. I'm like almost famous for it. It's one of the things I'm really good at in the glass.
Can you break that down a little bit? So like you are literally just putting the wire into a blowtorch and that is projecting it onto the glass, or what's the technique?
What I do is you take a tiny piece, and I mean like the head of a ballpoint pen, and I'd stick that on a copper pad, and then take a rod of glass and heat it up, and then pick it up. So I have this tiny little dot of glass on the end, and I put a tiny little flame that spits you have to mix the oxygen just right to get it to spray like efficiently. You can get away with it if it's reefing, but if you adjust your flame just right, it just pours like pink smoke over the piece, and you just roll that in the smoke, and wherever that gold touches it, it's encapsulated with 24 karat gold. And then I'll take a clear stick, like a long 4-foot piece of glass that's like 4 mil long, and then draw everything that I want to keep on the glass, or I'll just take that whole piece of tube and slide it in another piece of tube and encase it. the entire thing will be vacuum sealed perfect with that gold or silver or layers or whatever inside of it. It's like, and then we can do that with all kinds of different techniques. You just encapsulate,
Okay.
and pull out, and
So-
then blow it out thin, and it changes the color, the dynamics. But yeah, the amount of metal is paramount, because like if it's not 99 fine, it will be like muddy brown, and you can, that's basically it. But it's all the colors in glass come from metals. Every single color is a different amount of something. Red is iron oxide, blue is cobalt oxide, they're like gallium is green, like, and different percentages. One of my best friends I blew glass with for 20 years now owns a color company, and so I got to learn a lot, hyper amount of how this stuff is done. I've actually pulled color myself with him, and he'd batch color, and I'd help him get it out of the kiln and put for market, you know what I mean? So I get a little peek behind it, and it's interesting because it all starts in this cabinet of just metal powders, like a science experiment, just a couple teaspoons of this, a couple teaspoons of that, and you have these beautiful sparkling green glass off just tiny little flecks of metal. So like for them to say that cup is accidental is insane. It takes so much skill to get those colors to do that. Like right now, it is what's cutting edge in the glass world is the CFL and the shifty glass that is multi-spectrum, depending on what color light. You could turn it on in the kitchen, it's green.
So this is something that's still being kind of explored today.
Yeah.
Okay,
correct.
so it's not even fully something that has like been implemented for a long time and is fully understood. Like it's still kind of being developed.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah, no way.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got glow in the dark glass. I've got UV glass that you can shine a black light on it and it turns emerald green, or it's completely clear. Like you can, it's amazing, and like until the right spectrum hits it, you don't even know it's there. I make pipes and pendants and things that people wear into the club, and all of a sudden it lights up green spirals with polka dots. They didn't even know it. It's like, oh my God,
right.
I didn't even know that was there. I love doing that, like putting cool messages in pieces and stuff. So not telling people, hey, that's black light reactive, that's UV reactive. So they look, and all of a sudden it just says something one day. You know what I mean? Like
my mind immediately went to like the worst place. It's like we'd just put a racial slur or something in there. You know what I'm saying? Just...
I'm not gonna lie. I've said some fucked up stuff. Excuse my language, but I've said some, I've said some definitely.
Just put a swastika in someone's pendant that they don't know about.
I would never do that. I just gave the piece weird names. You know what I mean? Like give them just human names, and just like stupid things like Harry loves Sally and stuff. Like why would somebody put that? Like what I mean?
Yeah, no,
you
it's
to see it as it colors in and be like, does that say Harry? So yeah, I definitely play around with that myself, because the fume, it's easy to do. I do lots of pieces that are multi-layer fume work, because as it colors in, it looks completely different. It changes. Like every time you use it, or it changes. I make wine glasses that have designs in them. You put a red wine in it, it's got flowers and stuff all over it. It's fascinating. Yeah, I spent a lot of time doing that stuff. It's definitely passion. Once you start monkeying with it, it's the most beautiful medium there is. I'm taking like, it's almost like a form of alchemy. You're taking metal powder, mixing it with some sand, mixing that with some oxygen and propane, natural gas, and compressing it, and spraying some gold on there, and it's crazy. It's like, for me, it was very cathartic and hypnotic. I spent, if I didn't make money doing it when I was a kid, I would have done it just for fun. You know what I mean? But I'm glad I did, because it definitely taught me a lot about what's out there. What's possible with it. I just love making beautiful things that are going to last. And Pyrex is one of those glasses that it doesn't break. They make the windshield out of the space shuttles out of Pyrex. Like you could, I make pieces of glass you could throw on the ground and they'll bounce. Like literally roll down the sidewalk.
I seen a dude take a bowl and smack it in the wall, whack, 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 like a hammer.
Yeah, they used to advertise mine at the store down the street, and they'd throw them at the board on the wall. They had their advertisement on it, and be like, oh, it's going to break, and they'd just throw them. Pyrex is a totally different animal. It's like the new Gorilla Glue that they've made, which is like next up from Pyrex, that all these, or Gorilla Glass, excuse me, that the TV screens and our phones are all made of now. That Gorilla Glass is like the next level of Pyrex. Once that stuff is poured,
it is noticeable, man. My old phone had Gorilla Glass and my new phone doesn't. And within like 2 weeks, my new phone had more scratches on it than my old phone that I had for like 8 years.
Yep, that stuff is like the new hard glass. You know, like that's definitely.
That makes sense, because I had a phone and I punched the screen a couple of times and that thing nothing did. Took it like a champ, man. I thought the J7 was a tank.
There's another kind of glass that they make. They were using in forget what it was for. My partner that makes color was telling me that they have a trouble getting rid of it. Like the landfills won't take it because they can't break it down. It's like, so I guess the state of Florida was buying it and putting it in their asphalt to extend the life of the highways because it's so hard to
tough.
get rid of. Yeah, it takes like these big industrial machines to break it down just to use it. So they're just like,
would that be what they would like make sharpening stones out of?
I don't know.
Because there's a company that makes glass sharpening stones that blew my marble.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but I know my partner Justin was like, he ordered some to try and batch with it, because when you batch glass, you change the hardness of it depending on the metals and stuff. And he was like, man, that stuff is like alien glass.
So,
it's like steel.
This conversation has been even better than I was hoping for it to be. You've really, really been extremely enlightening. I have one final question.
Sure.
Which is, you're talking about the Grawl technique, if I'm saying that correctly. And,
yes.
So you're sanding this stuff down. So when I look at this lycurgus cup, it's obviously perfectly polished in its finished state. So Can you tell me how, I mean, is it I'm assuming basically the same as any other polishing process, you're just going finer and finer grit?
No, you get the
okay.
image that you want, and then you punny that sucker up and put it in the flame.
You just heat it up
for a few seconds, boom, fire polish, done.
Wow.
The entire thing heats up glowing red, and every single molecule in it is all in order.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, that's how like if you have a piece of glass that matters to you, you should put it in a kiln every couple of years, because it makes
refreshes
the molecules go back to what they're supposed to be. You know, every couple, you could bang it with a quarter 10 times and you'll never know, and then you'll bang it like the last time, the whole thing will explode because the pieces were actually like this.
Just rejuvenate your piece with some fire.
Yeah, and when you do that technique, it is very stressful on the piece. So they definitely had to refire that to get rid of all those marks and get rid of whatever they used to carve it away, sandblasting or some kind of tool, chisel, anything like that, because there's a couple different techniques. There's acid dipping also, depending on the hardness of the glass. There's acid etching that you do the same thing as the stickers, but you paint it on with a rosin, and then you dip it in acid, and it eats all that glass away relatively easy, and then they neutralize it, and boom, it's another way that can be done aside from the growl technique.
So, fantastic info. You've answered everything I was wondering about and more. So I guess just related, like I'm looking at an image of the glass right now. I'm looking at the guy's beard.
Yeah.
There's some pretty fine details in the beard. So what you're seeing in this glass is fully explainable by the techniques that you just described. Like that level of detail is works, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you have that. You've answered every question I had about this glass. And man, I hope everyone else enjoyed this as much as I did, because that is extremely informative. I did not understand how this thing was made. I did have the suspicion that it was probably a couple hundred or a couple thousand people that would be capable of doing this today, which you confirmed. But everything else I was way off base on, and you cleared it right up for me. So I really appreciate that. And that this thing is even more impressive now, I think, than I originally thought.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's not by chance. It's not a one-off. It just happened to be maybe imported from a place that we don't know about, like who knows where that came from, like it was found in one place, but where did it come from?
I will say the imagery does look rather Roman, but yes, sure. I who knows where the technique came from? Yeah.
Yep. Because I've never seen there's not a lot of it, and I'm in the glass world. I spend a lot of time going to exhibits and seeing and watching, and I know my very first book was about glass, was glass history, where these techniques came from. The Egyptians started the rake, there's evidence that's, 7,000 years old, these little vases that, or have the techniques that we do today in, glass making, on the side of this thing, and so I've paid real close attention. That thing is definitely, it takes extreme skill to manufacture or make that, and it definitely didn't happen overnight, and it's definitely not a one-off.
And like you were saying, those same kind of techniques of adding these metallics is still something being developed today. So the fact that they had figured it out, at least to the extent that they produced this over 2,000 years ago, that is quite remarkable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they definitely had a comprehensive knowledge of the metals and the layering. Like, it's not an accident they used gold.
Right.
Why did they choose gold?
And I believe the analysis was gold and silver, which is what you were saying. So yeah, it's just like you're understanding a very complex system, multiple metals and how they're interacting with each other. Like, this is really some complex stuff.
It is. Well, there's some commercial glass he showed me where it was the same exact color scheme.
Yeah. It is. It's new glass that's called the shifty glass and CFL glass. If you look online, it's under shifty borosilicate color glass and CFL glass, and you'll see all these different examples of the color that you can buy, and some of them, the one I think it's called experimental number 31. It is those colors, you know what I mean? Like, it's literally pink and
green,
beige, that change depending on the spectrum of light. You shine a flashlight on it, it's going to be orange. If you shine a compact fluorescent on it, it's going to be pink or clear, and some of them are blue, green, yellow, all the same color. You look, depending on the light bulb in the room, the glass is going to be completely different.
Right.
That's what's going on with those techniques right now. Is like the CFL is the big game. The pound of that glass is like $110.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's pricey. So
yeah, but the people that are using it are making things, and they're a few thousand. It's high end stuff. It's real elite. When you see it, it's very evident. Like, wow, that's something.
I got very slightly into the art marble world, the marble art world, a while back, and yeah, it is really mind blowing what these people are doing with glass, and to see what's still unachievable for so many people today being produced, like I said, over 2,000 years ago. It's even more mind blowing. So.
Oh yeah, they were throwing it down. No doubt about it. Whoever made that cup, they were throwing it down. Of all the things I've looked at,
it's one of the most standout pieces of expert craftsmanship that from the ancient world. There's so many impressive things from the ancient world, but this is one of the things that I look at and I'm like, this seems like a step above even these other things.
It definitely is, given the color, the sculpting, and anatomy. To get anatomy right in glass it's challenging, to get body proportions right. Like, you can't manipulate glass over and over. You get like one or two shots, if that, depending on what glass you're using. You blow it out and it's not right, you break it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so to get that to be, like that, there's so many
variables, and all of them are just perfect in this piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like in the glass world today, somebody would be considered flexing if they're throwing that down. You know what I mean? If somebody whipped that up, that thing's going to be $10,000. You know what I mean? Start at $10,000. Something that looks like that, even today. Like that. It's not easy to get stuff to look like that. Because.
Yeah.
When you mix all these metals, it changes the coefficient of expansion.
That's something I hadn't even added to my equation yet. Yeah,
they have to be right. So if they're not within 5 points of CFE, they will not be compatible, and they will crack and break. So to have those colors, that's what I mean. It's no accident. Somebody batched that and made those colors like that because It takes there's people spending millions of dollars in research to come up with these colors in the color industry. These guys are doing this every single day, 24 hours a day, trying to come up with new stuff. So for these people, and they'll put out crappy glass. It's got seeds in it, bubbles in it, like, because this metal didn't agree with this metal, and it looks cool, but if you heat it up, it cracks, and like, there's all this stuff that can happen. So yeah, that thing is like, it's definitely frustrating for me to read the Google, what they say about it, because it's so like, I'm just like, oh.
This is welcome to my world. This is that's the entire world I live in, is just frustration in every single thing I read.
I'm right with you. It was when you were talking about the archaeologist and the laws and stuff. It's like, it's a shame. Like, it's literally tyranny what they're trying to do. Why bother? Like, the truth is going to come out eventually. You're not going to be able to hide this stuff forever, Like,
well, they're doing a decent job, and I like I said, I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence, the timing of this law, because the truth is starting to come out. You see people finally getting interested in this in a big way, and then you have a law that literally makes all of it illegal. You're not allowed access to any of it anymore. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, the technology is catching up to where you or I could afford to buy a drone that has LiDAR on it. We could, you could start finding stuff on your own.
2 weeks ago, I interviewed Wandering Wolf. He's doing that. He's that guy that you're talking about. He just got into this. Yeah, and he's doing LiDAR scans and ground penetrating radar and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it has reached a point where your average citizen can go and make discoveries that are, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, like, some of that stuff, that thing is so poignant that it's laughable. It's like, how they dismiss things like that, to me, is like, man, it's like a nail in their coffin. You know what I mean? It's like, there's no way this is a one-off. Like, you guys are out of your mind. This is elite technology, elite understanding of the medium, elite understanding of, just, there's so much more going on in that just simple cup. You know what I mean? You look at it and it's like, unless you know what you're looking at, it is just a pretty cup.
And that was me. That was me. I genuinely had no idea what I was looking at. I knew it was impressive. When I looked at it, I want to know more, because I have a suspicion, I have a feeling that this might be just as impressive or maybe even more impressive than I think it is from my totally ignorant perspective. And I'm so glad I had you on, because you confirmed exactly that. It is just as impressive and even more impressive than I was thinking it was. Yeah.
That's probably why they dismiss it. They don't want to draw attention to it, like, it's already out there. People are talking about it, so they just got like, oh, that cup, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we haven't found anything else like it, so you don't even have to pay attention to it, really. It's not indicative of anything bigger. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, man, again, thank you so much for your insight.
No problem.
Truly, this has been awesome. Yeah, you've home run on every single point that I wanted to cover. You nailed it. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Cool. Glad I could help.
Yeah.
All right, we're out. Good.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Take care. So I'll see if I can cover it in the next 5 minutes, because I've got 2 things I wanted to cover quickly before I end the show. I might just save it for next episode. Nah, I'll cover it this time. I might go more in depth. I'll very briefly cover it here real quickly. So the Bat Creek Stone and the Tecaxic Calix Tlahuaca Head are 2 examples of objects that were found in the 1960s. No, that's not when this was found. Henriette Mertz, by the way, is the woman who inspected the Michigan relics, and she was a code breaker and all other kinds of credentials that very directly, relate to her ability to comment on something as the Michigan relics. She was a diffusionist, so she believed that other civilizations had made their way to America before Columbus. I agree with her, so I almost don't know why I'm mentioning this as like a... Because I am mentioning this as like a discredit to her, right? I'm going, she already believed in these ideas, so maybe potentially you should take her take on these ideas with a grain of salt. But I also believe in these ideas. I think it's obvious these ideas have validity to them, so maybe you don't need to take it with a grain of salt. I don't know. But she definitely believed other cultures had came over here, and she's a major proponent for the Michigan relics. She definitely had the expertise to talk on the Michigan relics, and the claims she made are quite definitive. You know, she goes, there's multiple different styles in these relics. These were not made by one man or even two men. There's like 30 plus different people at least involved in working on these things. You see different handwriting, various things like that. So anyways, I'd bring that up just because her name popped up here. This is the Bat Creek Stone. This was found. I wish I could see an easily. I'm not seeing exact. I see a whole bunch of dates, and none of them seem to be when this was found. But anyways, this was found on an archaeological dig. This was found by an archaeologist who is anti-diffusionist. He does not believe in diffusionism. He's against these ideas that this stone supposedly represents. And he did not present it as Hebrew. And I couldn't even tell you if it's this orientation or the other orientation. But the claim is that he represented this backwards initially. But if you flip it 180 degrees, now all of a sudden the letters resemble Hebrew. So he was claiming it was Cherokee writing, but if you flip it 180 degrees, it more resembles Hebrew writing. And the debate on this is still ongoing. There's even a couple of guys who have claimed that it is Celtic writing, although they've not shown their work to show this. So it's just a claim without any type of verification. And if you go to Google and you look at Celtic runes, they don't match up with this. Having said that, there's so many dialects, and the first result on Google is not the only result. There's so many. There's one of the in my research, something that I've been finding is that in America, a lot of these dialects don't perfectly match dialects we've already translated in the Old World. But if you look at examples in the Old World, there's a ton of dialects that we haven't translated yet. There's all these dialects of all of these ancient languages. Not all of them fit into, this, right? So, anyways, there's debate still to this day on what this text is or isn't. But the person who found it was an archaeologist, I believe, working for the Smithsonian. Yep, Smithsonian's Mound Survey Project. Excavated 1889. There it is in the very first sentence. I was missing that. So 1889, this was found by a Smithsonian archaeologist. And he did not present this as Hebrew writing. It wasn't until quite a bit later that someone went, hey, if you flip this 180 degrees, it sure looks a lot like Hebrew writing. And then at that point, they retroactively went, this archaeologist planted this. It's fake. He's a fraud. This guy who doesn't even believe in diffusionism is responsible for creating this hoax. This is dismissed as a hoax fully and entirely by the American archaeological community. This object that was found by an archaeologist who's anti-diffusionist, who did not present his findings as diffusionist findings. He presented them as Cherokee writings. This is now fully regarded as a fake and a fraud perpetuated by this man. So that's example number one. Example number two is the Takaxic Calixtlahuaca head, which I believe was found even earlier, 1933, in South America. Okay, I'm pulling up the Wikipedia here. We do know that Wikipedia is not reliable, but whatever. if my computer will even load, which it doesn't really want to. But the Tectaxic Calixtlahuaca head was found in South America near this pyramid during another archaeological dig by another archaeologist who is anti-diffusionist. And it is again regarded by the archaeological community as an outright fake, fraud, and hoax. So, and I wish I might go more in depth next week into this, because I'm a little foggy on all the details right at this moment, even though I reviewed them right before the episode started. Yeah, it just goes to show that even archaeological findings within archaeological context, which have absolutely no reason to dismiss them whatsoever, other than they go against the mainstream, are fully and entirely dismissed. They will slander their colleagues who are anti-diffusionists, colleagues that agree with them, colleagues that would also slander their other colleagues if they found this. They're comfortable slandering and throwing under the bus and going, look at these fakers, these frauders, these hoaxsters, these people. Let's destroy their reputation and their career. And I think I'm going to end the episode with that. By the way, one last thing. The archaeology department, they did tell me I could ask them questions. And I do plan on doing so. I do plan on sending them an email with questions. And even if the responses are non-responses, that in itself is informative. So if you guys have any questions that you would like me to ask, don't put them in the live chat. Put them in the comment section. Feel free to take your time, think about it. If you've got a good question, I'll put it in the email. I'll ask them. Let me know down below. Also, if you have any feedback on how you guys want me to cover this subject of the Americas, because I don't know how to tackle it. Do you guys want me to go over each individual instance of evidence? That could be a pretty time-consuming thing, especially depending on how deeply I go into it. Am I really doing heavy research on each individual example? This could really be a long process if I do. Or am I just pointing them out and leaving that to you guys to determine whether they're real or fake or whatever? Do I just go over the strongest examples like these two? Things that are actually found in archaeological contexts? Let me know, because I've got way more content than I can practically cover, at least in the near future, on this, and I'm not sure how to tackle it. I'm not sure the best approach. So if you guys have any opinions, let me know down in the comments. But definitely add your questions to the archaeological department if you want me to question them. As always, if you've got guests to recommend, by the way, Mr. Watson, I've still yet to see the email for History Homos. You need to send it to my email address. The YouTube filters does not allow me to see it. I'm quite confident you've posted it many times, and I have not seen it once. It just doesn't show up to me. So, yeah, let me know if there's any archaeologists or anyone at all. Let me know. I'll reach out to him. I'll try and get him on the show. We'll have a good conversation. And thank you to Mr. Gelunas. And I'm so sorry I forgot your name. But that really was, honestly, the best conversation I've had on here. That was so informative. I truly, truly appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. That was a very mind-opening, eye-opening experience. So with that, I end the episode. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys next week. Peace out.